Good morning.
Good morning. We still
It's
haven't.
still morning.
Anyway,
It's still morning for you.
it is. Oh, we changed time, didn't we? Did you change time? I think we did.
It's
We
10
we,
a.m.
we
here.
moved to daylight saving in France. I'm pretty sure.
So what time is it there?
It's 11. That's a silly question, but I think that's also no. We changed. I'm pretty sure we changed. We changes nothing. It's still 11. What changes is we had a gracious move from a government to move from a 6 p.m. to a 7 p.m. lockdown, which is technically an hour more, but the same
I
time of
see.
day because it's so the ambient light's the same as a 6 p.m., but it makes a massive difference for most people who are working between 6 and 7 p.m.
Wow.
And I was talking to let's begin with a tangent. I was talking to some friends who own a shop, and there was this woman who works in a bakery. So obviously, staple of French everything, bakery. And they were like, yeah, we're making all of our revenue before 6. So we're thinking, why would we open until 8 or 9 p.m. as we usually do? But I was like, but that's because people have to shop before 6.
Wait a minute. The bakery's open till 8 or 9 p.m.?
No, usually. Depends where, but in Paris, a lot of them can be open until 8:30. Yeah. It's Paris. Not other way, but it's the big city. Like, people work until 7:30 usually p.m. at least.
Yeah, that's true.
8:30.
True.
So there's if anybody watches this, there are widespread ideas about the French don't work. It's not true. Most of the French work really long hours.
Yeah, people really do think that. Oh, it's a 4-day week.
Particularly in private industries, and civil servants don't tend to work. I mean, I think civil servants are like civil servants everywhere. There's like 1 or 2 out of 10 who work really hard, and then the others are cruising. They may not like this, but any civil servants listening to us may think that they're in the 1 or 2 really working hard. I'm exaggerating the point, obviously.
Yeah, but it makes the point about civil servants.
People working in administrations of various kinds, usually, they're gone by the dot on the clock of whatever the clock is, time is.
Bureaucracy, categorization, prison, empire, all the things you've been reading about, all the things you've been watching about. Oh my God, we watched part 3 and 4, I think, or parts 2 and 3 of Adam Curtis's epic documentary, How Did We Get Here? 6-part BBC
you told me
series.
About that one, yeah.
Oh my word.
Is it good?
I think it's brilliant because he's it's like a visual mess collage thing of news footage and music and pictures and like everything, and he weaves together. He talks about Daniel Kahneman. He talks about economics, talks about psychology, and like I like it because I can't quite figure it out, but at the same time I can see what he's doing. So it's not like there is definitely a narrative to it, but it's like a wall of stuff that you're just experiencing. Ooh. So Davina and I, as we're watching, we're talking about it, and we're discovering, and it just the idea of big stories and myths and trying to make sense of the world and money. And I think probably that the most interesting thing for me is that he's not just focusing on the West. Yes, he's talking about America. It's like he's talking about America, Europe, and China. So he's bringing those different kind of views together, and Russia. He's talked a bit about that, communism, capitalism, that kind of stuff. So it's I think that's what makes it really, really interesting, because in China you might have much more of a collectivist way of thinking, whereas in the US much more individualist. But there's still things under the surface. He's drawing parallels, things under the surface that are hidden that people are struggling with, and that the people in power don't want to talk about. So really, I mean,
it circles back to, did I mention last time I started listening to the Philosophize This podcast from the beginning?
You did, yes.
So I passed through a couple of episodes on the basics of Eastern thinking. So Confucius and Confucianism, which is the strong basis for the collective idea and collective thinking that most Chinese society is rooted in.
Mhm.
There's more to it, but for the most part, they're still following that kind of thinking, which is super interesting to listen to. And what he was interested in was looking at how can we make this society work, because it wasn't when he was living, it was like warlords that were just fighting each other, and it was completely hectic. So he got very interested in how can we create, and he was very conservative and very traditional in his way of thinking. And that's like one of the things he said, well, we need to work, there needs to be order and working together for there to be harmony in living together, with a hierarchy, with an order, with caste, like a caste system, like in India.
I'm pretty
He
sure,
thought about it. He thought it through. He thought the whole thing
yeah,
through.
because India's very kind of the family kind of thinking too. And I did wonder, I'm sure Malcolm Gladwell said something about what you're talking about, but also linked it to the fact that a lot of the time it's about growing rice.
Yeah,
And
probably.
growing rice is completely different to growing a lot of other things.
Okay, I have not read that. I don't think so. That sounds
I'm pretty
interesting.
sure he says I'm
It
pretty
might
sure he
be
says
in.
it.
He talks about stuff like he usually likes making those kinds of comparisons.
Yeah, I think Harari says it too, but
I'm sure. I don't know.
who knows? Should we start season 2, episode 9 with a question then?
Let's
Seeing
do
as we've
that.
been talking for a few minutes. So this question's, I think it's kind of different. And when I was looking through the list of questions, and by the way, if you have questions, you should submit them to us. If you go
Yes.
to jamesdesouza.com, there is a link, a call for questions for teaching tangents. You can click on it. It'll take you to a form where you can submit your question. The idea is that you make it specific and clear, and you try to stump Willem. I've never known Willem to be lost for words. Ever, actually. Ever. No, he always has something to say. So, yeah, if you go to jamesdesouza.com, I might set up a separate URL for just the form. Submit
Yeah, why
your
not?
questions
Actually, we
there.
could do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So submit your questions there. But today's question.
I was wondering about teaching Tangents website, but anyway, let's go to the question.
Oh, we could. That would be quite good.
It would be a commitment to spending more time to actually take care of the show beyond recording it and publishing it.
It would. Oh, wow. Where's the question gone? Is it? Oh, here we go. Okay.
Okay.
Here. You ready?
Yes. As ready as I'll ever be.
Is it okay to cut them out of your life, in brackets, a toxic family member or toxic family members?
Oh, it's a good question.
So I'll say it again. Is it okay to remove, and in brackets, cut them out of your life, toxic family members?
All right, cool. This is a really good question. And I have experience on being cut out myself, not family member, but a friend. And experience. So I think yes, and it's very much a yes and. Insofar as, so there's a few different things. If this is asked by a young person or a student.
So this question wasn't from one of my students.
Let's say, because we may well have pupils, students, young people listening to this, because it's kind of the intention, like from so and imagining you're like, okay, my parent, close person, sibling is toxic, can I cut them out? You're like, well, you could, but you live under the same roof, so it might be complicated. So
I think the question to actually get to the stage where you're considering cutting someone out, I think there already has been some kind of movement away. Like university student, I'm imagining this would be more applicable to.
Maybe, I mean, not. It's well, perhaps, sure, but I think it's still important to say that. So we're covering. This is very delicate.
It is.
Well, because toxic relationship can be all sorts of stuff. It can be really like all the way to illegal, abusive, like nasty, really horrible behavior and or things that have happened, traumatic.
That's true. That's true.
This person's annoying me. So I think we need to, and I don't know how to tackle the question in what order, but we do need to address that this could be a lot of different things. And whoever is listening, it's entirely possible that somebody comes across and is looking for how to deal with like very traumatic events that have happened to them, or just very simple stuff. So we'll look at tackling and talking about the different range of stuff, and perhaps maybe start to talk about what are different kinds of toxic behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And
Within
also,
the context of family.
Yeah, family or close ones. I think you can extend it out to just whoever you're close with, and in the context of family. So, and it's even more salient, I would say, in the past year with the lockdowns. There have been like
Actually,
a lot of
yes.
news stories that have come out with increasing amounts of domestic violence, domestic abuse, and that can be like violence or sexual assault and violence and sexual abuse towards family members. So in the range of, so sorry, this is like heavy stuff. So I think we should probably make just a disclaimer. If you have kids around, depending on their age, whether this is age appropriate, you should check out. I always tick the YouTube saying this is not appropriate, like it doesn't go on YouTube Kids, but just to mention an extra thing, this might be a trigger. These may well, it's a trigger warning, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. I'm not going to say anything bad, but it's difficult and they can be delicate topics. But we can talk about incest. We can talk about like there might be rape, maybe incest, maybe just domestic abuse and domestic violence. And so for some houses, the past year have been pressure cooker environments of anything, for a lot more opportunity for difficult things to be happening. Just simply from like just being completely overwhelmed or having had enough of being in close proximity with your family, and just like I had enough of each other, without anything worse, but just this is just kind of normal because we're not used to being in close encounters, close proximity under the same roof for so long with anybody. And it's interesting they were just talking about collective cultures, because like places like China may well be more used to that because they grow up like that. There's just like the country's a lot more populated. I'm making a generalization, of course, because with a one-child policy, a lot of Chinese families only have 3 people in every household. But somewhere like India may well be very different. Places in Africa may well be very different.
I think you do have
socio-economic background.
Yeah, I do think it's worth bearing in mind the whole kind of individualist, collectivist way of thinking. Sure. Certainly in the UK, there are more poster ads on buses and on bus shelters. The charity called Calm, the campaign against living miserably, has put up ads. If I was finding life really difficult, and so I called Calm. And then you've had other ads talking about domestic violence increasing. And it's more, people are more aware of it. And then there's other things. So my sister works as an occupational therapist, a pediatric occupational therapist, working with children who've got big learning challenges, big social challenges, and they haven't been at school. They've been at home with mum and dad the whole time. And that is very challenging, very difficult. And and she was telling me it's as much about all the really difficult, horrible, traumatic things that can happen, but also through to the everyday frustration, and especially if you've got a child with learning needs. But then I've also heard colleagues say it's really hard having children at home if we'll be fine if we don't eat each other, was one phrase that I heard. And it is kind of, he's making a joke out of it, but at the same time, there is definitely a much more emotional edge, because we're not, I think you said it, we're not meant
and
to
I heard
live.
the same thing from friends of mine with their children, and they don't have any domestic abuse or anything. They love each other. They're fine. They're just like, it was just long and tough. To have everybody there at home, and it's just, not enough space for everybody to work separately on their own computers, or not enough bandwidth for everybody to have separate, because there's just like 2 parents and 2 kids all working remotely or studying remotely. And it's just very tense. And so I guess the one thing the takeaway from this is, as a frame or surrounding for a conversation, is that the past year has been not normal at all for anybody. And so if you're thinking that there's toxic behavior now, the toxic behavior of the family that this person asking the question may well already be pre-existing, but there's also such an environment for the past year in the midst of the pandemic that is just not normal, that has given rise to a lot of behaviors that have been difficult to cope with. for everybody. So I'm not saying you should, like, I'm not saying the person asking the question or the person who has that kind of question should cut slack to the person who they think has a toxic behavior. But a reminder that this situation has not been normal for anybody. So it has an impact on everyone. So I guess the question for the person asking is like, all right, well, one layer is this toxic behavior due to an effect of the pandemic and the lockdown and of being stuck at home?
Oh,
And
that's
is
a
there
great
any
point.
other way
Yeah.
to alleviate that somehow without cutting them out of your life entirely? But what I'm saying also includes the idea that you are stuck at home with this person.
Yeah.
In which case it would be difficult to cut them out entirely. Or also difficult idea, particularly again, if we're talking to young people, what's the alternative? If you're stuck at home with a person who has a toxic behavior, what's your alternative to that? Do you have another family member you can go to? Can you even talk openly to these people? Do you have to go to social services? Is it bad enough that you have to do that? Now, I may well be going on a tangent that has nothing to do with this person's situation asking the question, but it feels like the topic deserves kind of mentioning this type of stuff.
Agree.
Now, so toxic behavior, and then toxic behavior can just be and then there's multiple stuff. So I think I don't know if we'll see if there's more to cover in the kind of like very difficult traumatic type stuff, but I just wanted to mention that that's there. Then there's things that I feel this person is. I don't know. Toxic can be so many different things, right?
Yeah.
Just this person is diminishing me or demeaning me or not letting me. So there's one position that your person asking this question could be because it's not precise, could be a victim of the situation without necessarily being that obvious that you are a victim, if that makes any kind of sense. Like you're feeling that you might be a victim of their toxic behavior, but it's not like you've been abused or anything. Maybe they just yelled at you because your room wasn't clean. I don't, or maybe it's your weird uncle that is just racist or has very strict religious views or something that is completely opposite to your worldview and that you feel they want to impose on you, or they're just an embarrassment to you, perhaps, or something along those lines, right? Which may well be more common and may well be the kind of stuff that we hear a lot about, particularly again in the past few years as media and viewpoints and political landscape has become more divided, I guess.
Yeah, polarized, divided.
Divided.
Extreme
us
opinions
versus them on whatever field you want to talk about. Labor versus conservative, Republican versus Democrat, Trump, non-Trump. People want to save the planet and climate deniers. There's a lot of that, and extremes are getting a lot of ink, virtual ink, in terms of just like clickbaity titles, flame wars on comments,
and that happens.
Comment threads. Gaslighting as well, because it's like trolling and gaslighting just in case, like turning off some flames to see if people get excited about your worldview, your actual, not real worldview, but just provoking people.
Yeah, I've been known to do that,
which is toxic, which can be toxic behavior.
Yeah, it's but within families too,
trolling and flame wars are toxic behavior completely.
Within families, within generations is interesting as well. Like I notice it with how much I disagree with my dad, and how over the years I've been able to be okay with disagreeing with my dad, even when we really get into it and we really disagree about stuff. And having worked on myself to get to a point where I know that it's okay to disagree and it's okay to get angry and it's okay to and learning how to express it in a way that doesn't actually take anything from my dad.
Yeah.
That's been the biggest challenge for me. And I was actually talking about this with some pupils at school, how much I really did not get on with my dad. I really hated him. And that was the trajectory was that it was going to continue forever. and it got interrupted majorly when I was about 19, 20, 21. And it shifted my outlook completely, shifted my relationship with my dad. And then 20 years on, I can disagree with him like properly and still get annoyed, but not get stuck in it forever.
Yeah.
And that's, I think the self-awareness, and we talk about it a lot, the knowing yourself and knowing what your own triggers are. And of course, family are the best for triggers because they know exactly what to say.
So I think it's good that yeah, sorry.
My mum can say my name in a particular way and I can feel myself get annoyed.
Oh yeah, totally. My mom annoys me all the time. So I think what you're just pointing out, and of course we were going to come to that at some point because we talk about it all the time. There is also the notion of personal responsibility and development on, you know, whether it's okay or not to get rid of somebody and their behavior being toxic, their relationship with you, and whether it's okay or not to get rid of that person and cut them out of your life. I would say, regardless of what the right thing for you to do is about this, about cutting them out, about their being toxic, and about whether it's okay, because all of those are very wide open spaces. It really depends on one situation or another. Like there's definitely always nuance in the way that we approach most questions. There are some few questions that we tackle that have a clear yes or no, but this one is so open as to like what the exact situation is for each one that is really difficult. And I know, you know, I tend to be a person who's always like, well, it depends. There's lots of possibilities. And some people make fun of me and burn my life for that. But this one is like, well, it really, really, really depends, I believe. So anyway, there's a large part that is what you just pointed out to, which is always an opportunity for you to grow and look at your own responsibility within things and understanding yourself better, even if it's something traumatic that happened to you. But if it's something traumatic, then you probably take it very easy, possibly. This is where it's interesting that it makes me think of one thing that we don't really, I'll talk about from time to time, but meditation. And there's one tradition of meditation that comes through in the app that I have called Metta. Metta is I think it's Nepali. It's Pali word. It means loving kindness, and it's a specific type of meditation.
I have heard it. Yes, I have heard this.
It's a specific type of meditation practice where you focus on one person, or you can focus on several during the practice when you're sitting, and you're, rather than focusing like on your breath or anything, you're focusing on having loving kindness thoughts for this person in your life. And the idea, which is sometimes difficult to get into, or sometimes it's just a little bit elusive how you get to it, and when you get to it, it's difficult to keep together, is you're just opening yourself to emotion and to feeling the emotion that you have for this person, and to send them kind of loving kindness thoughts. And I think when people talk about the power of prayer, there's something similar to that. I think, I'm not sure because I'm not really into the power of prayer. I don't really know much about it. And one of the ideas is to realize that, or to connect with your emotions, to connect with your emotions about this person or about several people, and to get to the heart of like also that you want good things to happen to others. When you really get down to it, you want good things to happen to them. And one of the interests of the practice is to, perhaps when you get comfortable with it, to try to do this with people that you would immediately think that you don't want good things to happen to them. And that gets interesting anyway, it gets interesting, and it's really interesting to open yourself up to that amount of emotion. It's really interesting to sometimes, or at least for myself, and I guess it might be true for other people, to notice that it's easy to bottle up emotions and not necessarily easy to open yourself up to them. Because if you have anything that's kind of bottled up and you open yourself up, you have all sorts of emotions that come out, sometimes gushing, because we have pent up stuff that's, and I would say everybody has.
I'd agree with that. Have you done that?
So that was
kind
a bit of a tangent, but
have you done that kind of practice with someone who you wouldn't normally kind of feel loving kindness towards?
Yes.
What was it like?
It's really interesting because when you get into the practice, and I have to say, I think this is also down to me having done a lot of other kinds of work that makes it easier for me to do that.
Mm.
It's not necessarily easy to really open myself up, but there's also not a lot of people I really hate that much.
I'm thinking for myself because I've done that practice
now, and
too. But
I have an uncle
yeah,
that I believe is toxic, and I don't really want him in my life. He's not in my life.
mm.
So that's another thing I was going to come to, and there are practical ways that I can answer the question as well. So I I have an uncle. I mean, if ever he watches this, I think he won't be surprised because I've told him. And he forgets. So and it makes for delicate conversations with my mom because it's her brother.
Mm.
But I believe he fits within categories of being toxic and having toxic behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if he messages me, I answer. I have him on the phone from time to time. I don't really go out of my way to hang out with him or to see
Mm-hmm.
him.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that works. And he was at my 40th birthday. And again, he was super weird. And I was like, yeah, okay. He was welcome at my 40th birthday, and I'm not going to see him for a while.
But the interesting thing about what you're saying there that I like is that you're choosing where you put your attention and energy. And
yeah, and I could do that exercise, and I wish the best for him.
Sure, yeah.
But he acts and is in many ways that just don't work for me. So I'm like, you know what? It's probably better that I don't see him and I don't make efforts to have him in my life.
Mm.
Now, have I cut him off? No, I think that would be a little bit too harsh.
Mm.
But which takes us to there's a whole topic on what does cutting off mean.
Mm. Well, before we get to cutting off,
we'll get to that.
There's something else about the question. So if I redo the question, is it okay to remove, cut them out of your life, toxic family members, to actually have the awareness that someone else's behavior is toxic or someone else is behaving in a way that's like doesn't work for you or isn't great?
That's
or
a rough one as well, particularly
horrible.
if you're young. And I still have a hard time today because you're even more so when you're young because you don't, and actually throughout your life. Because like it's how do you react to things that you're like you feel don't work, but this is another person that may be older that may have more authority, and how do you say anything?
But even knowing it, so I wouldn't. Sometimes, I mean, there's a big thing at the moment in the UK. I'm sure you're aware of the woman who was.
Yeah, I'm vaguely aware, to be honest, because I read some stuff, but I've been just purposely not really paying too much close attention.
Yeah. I haven't, but it's
so if you summarize it, I think it was, what was it again?
It's not very far from where I live, actually. She was murdered by apparently a police officer and his wife or something. Like, I don't know the massive details about it, but it's given forth to like open the whole thing about protests and men's behavior and police brutality and all of that. And
there's a big march in France because I think it was a global worldwide day against racism yesterday.
Yeah, there was a worldwide day against racism.
Today's spring, by the way. We haven't.
So spring equinox is happening today, and today. The International Women's Day was a couple of weeks ago as well. Yeah. It's certainly.
And that event happened the same week, I believe, right?
Yeah, it did.
And then there was a big protest, and the police cut off or something like that, and then just made things the police worse. Are pretty. I don't.
Yeah, that's generally it, and I haven't looked at a load of details, but it does remind me that occasionally, as a guy, I can do stupid stuff and behave in a toxic way.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm not even aware of it. And unless someone points it out to me, I don't even know. Which is I'm grateful, to my sister and my wife and my mum, especially my sister, who's like, "What are you doing, you arrogant, whatever." And she's very, colorful with her language, but it keeps me in check because I don't know. So even having awareness of what someone else's behavior being toxic might be shows a certain willingness to be, oh, hang on, this doesn't work. Yeah. I think that's really hard to say, to actually go, do you know what, that behavior I've realized isn't cool because whatever, but then the next stage of actually addressing it can be really tough as well.
Yes.
So I don't sometimes generating and finding that awareness. We don't have the
tools for that at all.
Yeah. And then in a school situation, certainly with students, there was an incident in my school on Friday with some students I teach, and it was 3 boys, they were being not cool. They were being really negative about girls and women. And I had to take them to task about it. And then it turns out they were also taken to the deputy head about it. And I don't know what the outcome's going to be. I don't know how it's going to be addressed, but it's awareness of toxic behavior is like, it can be really hard. Now it can go too far and suddenly you can feel like can't say anything because you're going to offend someone.
Yeah.
And then,
and I know a lot of people feel that way.
yeah. And people, yeah. But actually taking the time to say something and then go, whoa, I didn't realize I was coming across that way. I'm really sorry.
And I think what you're mentioning is really important, that they're to have more of an opportunity for dialogue and being open.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of the culture that has gone to what I was mentioning earlier, which is like flaming wars and attacking each other online and talking behind people's backs and arguing online. I say online because it does tend to go very quickly this way. Partly, I think, because while you may not have, may not know how, may not have the courage to say to the person who has said something that you believe to be toxic. So instead, you go talk to somebody else about it online, for example. And then you have a lot of people feeling that, you know, you just, well, we can't say anything. But so there's this dichotomy and the kind of culture for warring and divisiveness and polarizing that gets and fueled by this whole thing, rather than having an open dialogue and saying, well, you know, this doesn't work for me. And I understand it is difficult, and it's difficult for the person on the hearing side of it as well.
Yeah.
But there's less, it feels like, no, I'm exaggerating. I was going to say there's less and less space for that. I don't think that's actually true. But there are a lot of people don't know, and it's easier not to say anything. And then it festers, which is not great.
Yeah, because what you described happens in school, in my school, all the time. And I see it with older students because they're discovering ways of communicating. They're finding out.
Yeah.
You know, someone will say something to someone else, and like they said this, and they won't necessarily have the guts to address it.
And it's a very teenage thing to do as well, to
Absolutely.
either remove people from the group or exclude them. And there's more and more of those that can have high stakes danger. Like I remember a recent conversation I had with somebody that was a networking video call, and that person was telling me about their son who had gone to a university in the States. And after a party, he was accused of sexual assault and had to leave the school. But what the kid said, the young man in question, said, well, from his perspective, he was at a party where he didn't know anybody, and he went to talk to this girl and asked her if she wanted a drink. And the father was believing him when he said, I promise you, lad, that nothing really happened at all. But she took offense at something I said. And instead of telling me or doing anything else or just resolving it during the night, went to accuse him of sexual assault, and he had to leave the school because then everybody was against him. Now, and it's very difficult because real sexual assault also happens.
Yeah, it does.
So if we are to believe the story that happens, and go figure, also what's difficult for a lot of young men is also that they get, some of them are rightly accused, some of them are falsely accused, and all you have is the word of the person. And in most cases, in the history of just this, and we're two guys talking about it, in most cases, the women are not listened to, and they have been wronged or have been raped, and they're not listened to, and then the guy who did it is out there. Or had influence of some kind, but the opposite also happens. And I don't have a solution to this at all. I really don't. I don't know what the right thing is or anything, but it's just, again, it's just pointing to this. And I don't know, how can we have a little bit more open dialogue rather than spate? And, but it's just young people do this because its popularity is currency, and social, being part of the in or out various groups is currency. So getting rid of someone is something that you know, go figure what happened in that interaction, go figure whether they had been drinking or not. Apparently it seemed quite innocent, but also, like, I mean, that kind of stuff happened to me when I was a teenager in the States. And the States can be quite mean. I think everywhere can be mean, but I remember, and it was not sexual assault or anything, but I was visiting friends with my parents in the States, and I was hanging out with the kids who were my age when I was 16, and they were
Hmm.
more or less teenagers. And one day, I don't know, to this day, I don't know what happened,
Mm.
but it's something, I was hanging out with them, and all of a sudden, like everybody turned, in my experience, everybody turned on me. Somebody
Wow.
said I had said something about someone, and I was like,
Wow.
I have no idea what's going on. And then they were all like, well, if you said that about that person, we're not hanging out anymore.
Like, was
Disgusting.
it
What
like
you
a
did was
switch
disgusting.
like
Yeah,
that?
it really felt like it was a switch. And I had
Wow.
no idea what rumor had been said. And I was like, and I came back to the house, I was just like puzzled. I was like, I don't really
Wow.
understand what happened, but these people don't want to talk to me anymore.
Mm.
And that happens to a lot of young people.
Hmm.
And go figure, maybe in their world, one person may have gotten rid of me for whatever convenience because I was a scapegoat. Or also, it's also possible that several people thought I was toxic and said, well, we need to get rid of this guy. I don't know. How
Mm.
would I know?
Mm. I think something that can help is actually being able to articulate your own emotional state. Because one of the some pupils I teach, they find it hard to explain what they mean and what they're thinking because they're
It is
not
very
given
hard.
very much opportunity to explore and do that.
Yeah.
And and then also being a role model. I see myself as a role model for them to be able to say what's going on with me in a way that supports them so they can see it's okay to be able to talk about
Yeah.
whatever is going on with you.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that allows the nuance to happen.
Yeah.
I'm not just saying you're an idiot.
And most
I'd
of the
be
time,
like,
we don't know what's going on with ourselves.
this is true.
We don't know
Yeah.
that whatever's gone on in an
Yeah.
interaction didn't work for us until much later when we're like reflecting on it and going, well, wait a
Hmm.
minute, that didn't work. And if we're talking about young people, they
Hmm.
even know less because even though you act like you know, but you don't have the experience in reality. And also there's like just midst post puberty, there's a lot of hormonal and emotional stuff going on in a way that you don't understand yourself at all.
Mm.
And this is like, and we don't even understand ourselves later in life unless you do put work in, which is not
Hmm.
necessarily, it's getting more common to talk about it, to talk
Hmm.
about your feelings, to talk about understanding yourself and responsibility, but it's not everyone. And it's
Hmm.
not taught at school, not really.
No, not really. Not really at
So,
all.
and it's
No.
not universally taught by parents. So there's a lot of like, how would you know? How would you know how you're feeling, and how would you know whether you're giving an opportunity to somebody to speak or not, or to say like that person's toxic or not? And
Or
I'm
how
not
do you
saying you
know
don't know that
if
that
you're?
person is toxic. I'm saying that on the spot, you might not know how
Oh,
that
this is a good
behavior is
point.
affecting you.
Mm.
And you might not know that you're not giving that person an opportunity to speak. And you also wouldn't know what to do. And if, let's
Mm.
say, if it's somebody that's really just mean or yelling, you have the reptilian brain, reaction,
Mm.
which is fight or flight. And
Hmm.
either typically, if somebody's being toxic, you might feel threatened, and you go back to your animal kind of state, and the reflex is fight, flight, or paralysis.
Mm.
So either freeze, fight, or flight, right? I tend to freeze, and I don't know what's going on. I don't say anything, and then it's later I'm like just can reflect on what happened and realize, oh, that person said something that didn't work for me, and I didn't say anything. Or fight or flight, but all of those are automatic
Mm.
reactions to threat. So you're not thinking anymore. It's later that the thought can be kicked in, and so anyway, that's like commentary around the question still.
Yeah. Again, something else that's helped me own my emotional state is journaling.
Yeah,
That's.
meditation and journaling. And I talked
Mm.
to my brother who just started meditation, and he noticed
Mm.
already a difference after 2 weeks of doing
Oh
it every
wow.
day. And he said, well, I'm just touched on the fact that doing it every day makes a difference.
Yeah.
And he could start touching on his emotions and the fact that he could be detached from them.
Mm.
So
Is he
journaling and
using
meditation
Sam
helps it.
Harris the same as you?
Yeah. I gave him a free month of it. You
That's
can
great.
download there's tons of others. We mentioned before, and Headspace, Calm, Insight Timer has a lot of free content. And the Sam Harris Waking Up app, which is the one I'm using. There's a free version. You can check it out.
I use calm.com.
And if you don't have
like
money, it's a paid app for Sam Harris. But if you don't have money, you can send an email. They'll give it to you.
Yeah.
It's based on honor. So that's, up to your own.
What do you mean? The price is based on honor? You pay what you want?
No, when you send an email saying, I can't afford it, can I have the app, please?
Oh, I see. Okay.
As in, they'll give it to you.
Yeah.
It's an honor system. Yeah, that's what I mean. They're not going to come and check, and they may well be giving it to people who can actually afford it. But it's an honor system that you'll deal with your own morality if you
right. Yeah, your own conscience. So
that's and then I would tell the story where a friend got rid of me, which was interesting for my apparent toxic
is this more
behavior.
recent?
Yeah, like a few years ago. I'm sure I told you the story.
I don't remember.
Close friends, and the wife of a very close friend, and I was supposed to attend their wedding, sent me a text one day, and I hadn't seen her in months, saying, my partner has been bugging me about me talking to you. I don't have anything nice to say, but if you'd like to talk, we can meet up. And I was like, well, that's ominous.
And was it out of the blue as a text?
For me, out of the blue.
Okay.
Now, after the fact, I can say that I thought something was slightly off, but I didn't have any reason to go dig in to believe that something was slightly off, because that would have been kind of like paranoid.
Yeah.
A little bit. And I hadn't seen her in a while, and I noticed that I'd seen him without seeing her, but I'm also friends with him first. So, I was like, oh, and I had checked in with him a few months before, like, is there anything going on that between me and her that is not working? And he was like, oh no, don't worry about it. She's, there's nothing. I'm like, okay. And then, so my thoughts start swirling all around, because I'm like, what have I done?
Yeah.
What happened? What have I done?
Yeah.
And this was a time I was doing a lot of coaching course, and I was doing something on meditation. I was meditating every day, journaling, still do, by the way. And so I was able to detach myself from what was going on. I think normally I might have gone into a discussion by text, which is a very bad idea. Don't do that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I know young people might tend to do a discussion by text because you're more comfortable with it.
Yeah,
but this kind of stuff is not a good idea. And you probably know that it's not a good idea, even as a teenager, when you get into, I'm sure you have at one point or another gotten into a text conversation with a lot of emotional load or interpretation stuff that didn't go well. And if you're still wondering why, one of the main reasons is you did that by text message. I can't guarantee that it would have gone better in real life, but at least you have you can empathize with the other person when you hear their voice. You see them even more so. And so anyway, so I was like, okay, I'm not going to get into this by text. I'm just going to literally factually organize a meeting. So that's what we did. And we said, okay, that was a Sunday, Tuesday night, we meet up at this bar. And then Tuesday afternoon, I was with colleagues in a car coming back from a client meeting, and I get a long text from her saying, just so we're clear, if you would still want to meet up tonight, this is not a conversation. This is not an exchange. This is me explaining to you why we're no longer friends.
Wow.
And I will do that and speak at you. And that's it. And if you're not okay with the terms of this, then we don't have to, let's just cancel. And I was like, okay, wow. So I went to talk to somebody. That's another resource, is to go talk to friends who are neutral to the situation, who might be willing to lend an ear so that you can either vent and it's not necessarily looking for advice. It's just somebody who can listen to you.
I think that's a really, really important point to make about.
Very important point. It's usually, and this is when you know this when you're a teenager, when you have somebody you can speak to about stuff.
Going to speak to someone, but then the person is just going to listen and not give you advice.
Which is another way to answer the question on, is it okay to remove or get rid of somebody that has toxic behavior? Go talk to a friend about it, and they'll be able to not necessarily advise you, but they'll be able to listen in a way that you can just talk out your situation.
Yeah. And you can ask, you can
people
say
will give you advice, because everybody just loves giving advice, but
you can actually say, I just want to talk something through. I don't necessarily want your advice or opinions. Just, hear me out, just listen. huge thing to be able to say and get that,
Yeah,
because everyone is so ready to jump in with their thoughts, opinions, ideas of what you should do.
yeah,
And just separating that, I think, is a really useful skill, really
absolutely.
powerful thing to practice.
Yeah.
So you
And
talk
so
to a
funny
friend,
enough, I'd lost sleep over this because I was really worried about like what have I done, to trying to
right?
remember every
Yeah.
single conversation, every single thing, and so two things. One, by the time we met, I had exhausted every possible horrible things I could have done. So I was like, I guess I'm ready to listen to anything now.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was like, I looked at everything I did and I couldn't see anything that was just clearly horrible that I'd done. So, and I
And
had
you'd
already
spoken to
inflicted
someone
on
else.
myself a lot of worry. So by the
Okay.
time we met, I was like, well, I guess I did all that. And then talking to people, I was able to vent a lot of my worries
Right. Sure.
and to go, okay, well, you know what? This is a friendship that means quite a bit to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I could refuse the meeting because I had a lot of my side, and my friends, my colleagues that I was chatting to in the car were like, why would you even do that? Go to this thing. Don't go.
Mm.
Which is a certain like completely valid way of looking at things,
Mm-hmm.
completely fine.
Mm.
So it would be like, yeah, why would I subject myself to this if this is a person who doesn't like me? Clearly, just forget it. But I also thought, you know what, my friendship with them means a lot to me. I
Mm.
could cancel now, but then at least if we see each other, there's an opportunity for a conversation or a dialogue,
Mm.
even if she
And
says she doesn't
closure.
want it. Yeah, I guess. Sure. Anyway, it was so I went, and it was one of the most surreal meetings I've ever had. So we showed up at about the same time, and she just literally pulled a piece of paper with a letter and unfolded it, read it to
Wow.
me, and then left.
Wow.
It took 2 minutes,
Wow.
and the contents was more or less. I was amazed at how calm I was by that time. I was like, I guess as I said, I've listened to everything and imagined everything I could. In short, it was that it was more or less basically she was telling me all the reasons why she doesn't like me,
Mm-hmm.
and that I'm an arrogant person, that I don't really let her express herself, that I am always the one putting her down whenever she's feeling great and has good news.
Mm-hmm.
There was something to that effect. Literally, it was a few years ago, and I don't remember everything. So I don't mean to be dismissive, but
So it wasn't a specific thing. It was like a almost like a list or
yeah, it was like
just
a list, but it was not really specific. Well,
okay.
it was to her basically. I was arrogant, horrible, made her
Yeah.
feel horrible, and that if somebody doesn't bring you any joy or bring you anything positive in your life, you should cut them out of your life. And this was what I am doing with you now. Something like that.
Okay. Right.
Uh, uh, so yeah.
And it was all one way.
Oh, completely. And she finished and she left, and I was like,
Wow.
and
Wow.
so one, I felt like, well, yeah, if you really think those things of me, then we are clearly not friends. And I have made up, or I don't think I made up the good stuff that happened in our friendship. But you were harboring a lot of things that you didn't tell me. You never gave me an opportunity to work them through or to talk about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So remember that when you think, you want to get rid of somebody who's toxic, maybe there's an opportunity for having a dialogue and maybe talk with a third person, a neutral person first, assuming that what just happened is not something completely horrible or traumatic, like we mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
So giving an opportunity to somebody to talk, and maybe now is not the right time for that. So maybe you want to do that later. I don't know.
It's so brilliant the way you were able to speak to other people, and then by the time you got there, you were surprised at how calm you were.
Yeah, and you got to remember that when we mentioned that we've done a lot of work, this is a result of a lot of work. I'm no longer a teenager. I've done a lot of work. I've done a lot of coaching classes. I've done a lot of meditation. I've done a lot of journaling. I've done a lot of talking with people. I've done a lot of personal development classes of various
Mm.
kinds.
Mm.
So it's not pinpointing to any one thing, but I'm saying all this also not to hit yourself over the head if you're not able to do that,
Yeah,
because it takes a lot of practice, and I
it
have a
does.
lot of practice in getting through. And I'm not perfect. I'm human. I get things wrong a lot. But my ability at that particular point to be calm about it was the result of then 37 or 38 years and less, because I really started a little bit, when I was a teenager myself. When I was a teenager myself, I started looking into that kind of thing. And I still, get upset and I still get things wrong, but it's possible. And it's possible to, it's possible. So just don't hit yourself up on the head if you don't get the result that you want now.
Yeah.
Is, I guess, the message that I wanted to convey. And also, like, we don't have to be friends with everybody. Yes. I thought, from my perspective, I thought that this was a very strange way for me to exercise her demons. I'd never heard of this kind of thing before, like literally to like organize a specific meeting with somebody to tell them why you hate them, which I was like, I don't feel that's really necessary. It doesn't, no, my pop psychology, explanation of this is one, and plus I talked to her partner before, after.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay.
They had an argument.
Yeah.
She partly at least did this to spite him after their argument.
Wow.
I strongly feel when she was talking to me, and again, I don't know. A lot of people asked me, like, did she fancy you? Did you guys have anything happen between yourself? Like, and I was like, no. I mean, or at least not that I know. Okay. And it really felt like she was exercising some demon from the past. I mean, this sounds lofty, right? But I felt like she was either talking to somebody like her dad, her ex, or someone, but like not, I don't think, and that I was representing that other person for her. Yeah. Or I was that person and she literally had never told me any of those things, but I also had some great times with her, which I'm like, did I make those up? And I also understand that there are times where she felt badly and I must have hurt her, but I never really got to have a chance to know that because she never told me. Yeah. And I was oblivious to it. And I think there were times where we had what I thought were playful arguments, discussions, debates. And I was playing with a prick that we had different perspectives. And actually, she was really hung up about those things. It seems like from that conversation. And anyway, she left and I was like, I guess I'm 3 months from their wedding. I was like, I think I'm not invited to the wedding anymore, which I wasn't. And it's a shame because then, of course, it affected my friendship with him, which I think was pop psychology part of the goal.
Wow. I don't know if you've ever told me this. I don't think you have. Maybe you didn't.
It really affected me. I told a lot of friends about this. I've never had anything so strange happen to me in my life. And I'm like, it was also an interesting one. Not everybody likes me. That's fine. But then if I don't really like somebody, I don't feel like I have to go out of my way to tell them. I just kind of, just let things slide and see them.
Yeah, the amount or not. The amount of energy you're going to put into it is going to be naturally. You got a choice about how much energy and time you give to something. So you just
Which is one way to answer the do you need to remove or cut out of your life the toxic behavior? Just like I was talking about my uncle. And if there's somebody really that is weird for you, doesn't work, they act in ways that don't work. You're like, I don't know. Depending on your relationship with them, do you feel like you need to reform them or change them, which is not going to be a very easy thing to do? Or like you said with your dad, you can have disagreements. I would not recommend cutting out of your life your parents if you can afford it.
I'd agree with that.
And if you had really traumatic stuff happen, or if they're really, really, I don't know, like they're clinically or they have really serious psychological problems and they're in a mental institute, or they're very dangerously, I don't know, alcoholic, or they have drug addiction.
Oh, danger to themselves, danger to others, danger to you.
And making up those kinds of
professional help.
Yeah, and I mean, just maybe put it to the side, but just keep the idea that you don't have to cut them out entirely. And there might be a way for you to have a relationship with them somehow, some kind of something, maybe.
And you're talking specifically about parents, right?
Yeah, and I think close family members too. Now, if they're further family members, it matters maybe less, but it depends. I guess it depends how meaningful they are to you, because I don't know your life. You know, some people have been raised by their grandparents. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And in which case the grandparents have parental figure and authority. But why is you don't want to cut yourself off entirely or forever from people that are extremely important and influential figures in your life. And I don't mean keep your relationships with people who have abused you. That's not what I'm saying. It might be appropriate for you to cut them out. But I'm saying just maybe keep the idea in mind that there might be an opportunity for you to, I don't know what it is. I don't know what the opportunity is, because every situation is different. The opportunity might be for you to be able to get to a point of doing meditation one day on the person that you, and say, actually, yeah, I do wish you the best. And that is then not completely cutting them out. Then you don't have, it doesn't mean you get them on the phone at all, you know, or see them.
I'm sure you've heard the quote about resentment. I don't even know who said this, but I've heard it so many times.
Yeah.
Resentment is like drinking the poison and waiting for someone else to die.
Yeah.
And it's,
there's another one that I've heard in coaching classes, which is a semantics one, is that we usually talk about harboring resentment. You know, that's a colloquial. We say that. Right?
Yeah.
So if you think about what a harbor is.
Oh, yeah.
A harbor is something that protects boats from the elements.
Yeah.
So you're welcoming the resentment and giving it a protective environment and a place to stay. And you're like, is that a good idea to really do that with resentment? Because then it grows. Now, I don't know what the right solution is for the one person listening to this, but maybe you don't want to drink for your own poison or harbor, keep the resentment there forever.
It sounds like there's a few things we've talked about, like meditation, journaling, talking to a neutral party.
Talking to people, and, you know, it could be anything from talking to friends to going to see someone, a therapist of some kind, to looking at coaching, to looking at personal development, to...
I missed what you said completely because my phone went off.
I'm sorry?
I missed what you said over the past kind of 10 seconds because my phone went off.
I said just I was bouncing back on, like, talking to somebody neutral.
Yeah.
Maybe the somebody neutral is talking to a therapist or talking to a coach or a teacher or another family member, or, you know. And I think all of those things are great ways to get to know yourself better and to look at every possible way that you can make that relationship work. And work is a very broad term, without necessarily cutting them off, or cutting them off without necessarily saying, I'm just never seeing them again or never thinking about them again. Because if you have anything that is bottled up, then it stays there and it hurts you.
Yeah.
Without affecting the other person, is what I mean to say. So that's what you want to look at, not the fact that you should or shouldn't have, you know, talking regularly to that person or cutting them out. And then it really depends, again, back to the beginning of the conversation. Is this somebody that you live with? I mean, I don't know, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
sorry for having a very wide open, it depends answers, but I think we gave a lot of avenues quite clearly and examples as well.
Yeah, I think it's worth remembering how important relationships are to our experience of life.
Yeah.
And the different kinds of relationships that we have, friendships, family members, like siblings, intimate relationships, all those relationships go towards, in a large part, making up who we are.
Yeah.
And the quality of relationships is so important. I know that when I'm off with my wife, it tends to affect other areas of my life. But if I'm all good with her, that tends to give me a good base from which to, like, achieve everything else that I want to achieve
and that usually goes with parents.
Yes.
Now, I know it's stereotypical, and if you're a teenager, you may not want to hear this, Or if you've had a really, really traumatic experience with one or both of your parents, it might be difficult to hear. And in which case, don't look at that now. It might not be the right time. But also keep it, you're like, all right, maybe there will be a right time. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. Like this conversation is reminding me of it wasn't Friday. God, Friday was a bit profound day at school.
Oh, yeah?
I teach every single lesson, and there was this conversation about the boys being really negative about women, being sexist and verging on misogynistic. There was a pupil who I didn't know, because I was teaching about attachment in psychology syllabus. There was a pupil who I didn't know that one of their parents had died in October, and they just talked about it in the class. They were just open about it because we were talking about relationships with parents. And then there was another pupil who said that it was relatively recently, in the past, like maybe 2 months, that one of his best friends committed suicide. It all came out in this
Wow.
day at school in my lessons. And I think that there's more. I think, yeah, this might be quite a nice place to end. Like the quote that struck me was, everyone's fighting a battle you know nothing about. You never know what's going on with other people.
Yeah, no, you don't.
The more,
this friend I'm talking about, slight tangent before we finish. I forgot to mention, there was the year before this happened or something, I learned from him, so the partner, that I had said something that had upset her. But he told me it came out in a conversation that was like 6 months to a year after the event. So I did not know what I'd said that hurt her. But I went ahead and apologized. But the thing is, but by the end, so I understand that I said things that have hurt her probably more than once, given she could decided to cut me out of her life. And just as you said, there are things going on that you just don't know. But literally, because she never told me, I could never pinpoint the thing. Now I have an idea and I have a notion, and I've been trying to be more mindful of, but I don't always know when I say things that are offensive to somebody. I just don't know. And you can't be responsible for people's reactions. However, you can look at being responsible for your own, and you can learn to tell other people when they're saying something that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Without attacking them, or without attacking them behind their backs.
Yeah. And again, you reminded me, like at school, I said something in a lesson, and it was an online lesson actually, and a pupil got really annoyed with me, and I had no idea. And this pupil emailed me, and then I actually called them on video and had a conversation, found out what it was that I said, like completely apologized, and said and sorted it all out. And it made the pupil feel way better, and it also made me realize, like, it was an instant throwaway comment. I had no idea that was the effect they had, and I was
so glad. How did you find out that there was an effect? Sorry, I missed that.
The pupil messaged me and said,
he said, okay,
and apologized.
They said,
yeah,
right,
they apologized, like for.
So for so they did that, which is great to be able to.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
That's awesome. Cool.
It was brilliant, but I knew that I wanted to resolve it within the time, within a few hours of getting the email. So that's why I set up the video call and was able to clear it all out. And that I hope made a difference for them to know that it's possible to be able to sort things out in a conversation, that it can be done. It doesn't have to kick away in their head for ages and then affect their experience of learning and their experience of me and then whatever.
Yeah.
So it's possible to sort it out in a conversation, and it takes courage, insight, self-awareness, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
And it's not easy, and it takes practice. The first time you might try it, it might blow up in your face. Okay, well, and that's happened to me plenty of times.
That doesn't mean you shouldn't try it again.
Yeah.
Practice makes perfect. Funny enough.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
thank you.
I think we should. We didn't do t-shirts last week. Maybe we should end on an upbeat. What have you got today?
Sure. So I'm sure I've worn this before. I'm out of t-shirts. Just this. Ceci n'est pas une pipe.
You have.
Yeah, I'm out of t-shirts. I don't have any more.
Last week's t-shirt was brilliant. Game of Cones.
Did I
was
show it in
brilliant.
the end? I couldn't remember. I hesitated
did.
putting it again.
Well,
I
you
did show it
did.
at the end.
No, well, I don't think you showed it to me, but I don't think it was on the recording. It wasn't in the episode. And I was wearing Grunge
For
is
a hot
Dead.
second, I was like, should I wear this one? I can't remember if I actually showed it on camera.
Such a great. It's so great because for me, it's the whole ice cream for everyone. It's also Game of Thrones,
Yeah,
that
that's why I
kind
wanted
of
it.
world of things.
I'll
And
wear it next week.
given our conversation, I'm wearing Freud.
That's great. I love it.
So it's been quite a very interesting conversation this week, and I think I will. Maybe it relates to my t-shirts. I don't know.
Yes.